Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On Sunday, I just returned from a visit to the DRC. I went to the DRC, Rwanda, the Republic of the Congo, Burundi, and Uganda. I met with the president in the DRC, the president in the Republic of Congo, the president in Burundi, and the president in Rwanda. I left encouraged in some ways and discouraged in other ways, as you can imagine. I feel like that there is unbelievable potential in the area for peace and security and for the killing and the bloodshed to stop. The resources there are just through the roof, and tens of trillions of dollars in resources. DRC could be one of the wealthiest countries on the entire planet. But I do believe that certain things have to happen, and I don't know exactly what the answer is to get there. I think that, for this to exist, the Eastern DRC has to be an area where everyone has a vested interest in the safety and security and the ability for foreign companies to come in and invest in the area. And when I say everybody, I mean the DRC, I mean Burundi, I mean Uganda and Rwanda, everybody that's there. We all know right now that the Eastern DRC is a completely ungoverned area. It's like the wild, wild East, right? And I truly believe that there is no ability for the government in Kinshasa to actually control that area right now. They do not have the resources or the ability to really impact what's happening there. And they are actually becoming, in my mind, just another entity there that is trying to take advantage of the resources there and get what they can. And everyone's doing it. We know this, right? We know that the Uganda is bringing minerals in from there. Rwanda's doing it. Burundi's doing it. Everyone is doing it, and there's really nothing there to stop them. I think that the Congolese government has to do a couple of things. One, they have to address the domestic issue, right? There are a large number of people in the Congolese that are not Congolese citizens, that are not treated as Congolese citizens, including most of the members of M23, so on and so forth. Now, M23 is a rebel group, and we know that there's an influence there, and there's a component of the Rwandan defense forces, the Rwandan military. But honestly, M23, with or without Rwanda right now, is pretty much uncontested in the area. They're just doing anything they want right now, and the Congolese military is not even fighting back right now. As a matter of fact, they're just running away ahead of the, M23, or in some cases they're laying down their weapons and they're joining M23, right? So I think that the Congolese government's in a bad position here, but I do believe, it's been a long-standing issue, is my understanding, that there are certain people in the Eastern DRC that are unrecognized as Congolese citizens, and that maybe in part because this used to be Rwanda before the lines were redrawn many years ago, and and that used to be part of Rwanda. But I would submit to you that there's a large part of Uganda that also used to be Rwanda as well. And after it's been redrawn, now it's Uganda. Those people were immediately assimilated and treated as Ugandan citizens, but that has not happened in the DRC. And I think that's part of the problem. I think that this domestic issue has to be addressed, that everyone in the region, everyone in the country has to be treated as a Congolese citizen with all the rights and privileges of such. I think that this is a difficult thing to do, but I think at some point the armed resistance of M23 are not going to just put down their weapons and walk away. I think that they are an armed resistance. There has to be an effort somehow to incorporate them into the Congolese military and make them feel like Congolese citizens that are protecting their country, not what's going on right now. I think that that's one of the problems. I think the other problem is that they have the domestic problem, or they have the international problem, obviously, which mainly focuses right now with around the relationship with Rwanda. And I think that there has to be an ability for Rwanda and the president. I talked to Kagame, I talked to Tshisekedi, I talked to both of them, and I think that one of the biggest problems right now is personally they can't get along. And I think that at some point people have to put their personal differences aside. This has to be a region that's beneficial for everybody, that everybody sees profit, and everybody has a reason for that to be an area of stability, right? And I think that, I don't know the answer to this for sure, but the neighboring countries have to benefit from the minerals that are in the Eastern DRC as well, whether that's they have some refining capability, and the minerals are mined there and refined elsewhere, or there's a refining capability in the DRC, refining capability in Rwanda. Everybody has an ability to make some money from what's going on there. Then I think everyone will have an interest in making sure that this is a safe and secure area. They're going to need foreign investment to come in. They're going to need other countries' businesses to want to come and operate there. Right now, that can't happen because there's not the required level of safety and security, and there's not the lack of corruption. It doesn't, there's going to be a certain level of corruption everywhere you go. But, when I was there, I was shocked at the level of corruption there. I talked to a Swiss company this morning, and they told me that their company was worth something like $18 billion, and they got a tax bill last year for their company for $80 billion, which is ridiculous, right? And so they protested it, and they got it reduced to $1 billion, which is still hundreds of times more than the profits that they make in the year. So they're being taxed at an unreasonable rate. Bribes, obviously, are a big deal. The Chinese can afford to pay the bribes, or they're willing to pay the bribes, and we as the United States are not. Many countries are not willing to do that, so they end up being able to compete without competition. There's a biased justice system as well. You can never be assured that if you go there and you get into some kind of legal disagreement, that it's going to be a fair judgment, and they're going to rule in your favor if you're in the right. There's manipulated exchange rates. There's unreasonable fines. There's evidence everywhere that members of the government and their family are getting filthy rich from what's going on there, while the population there is starving and living in a horrible environment. I think that we have to come up with a way to fix this. I think that until that happens, a lot of this other stuff is not going to matter. I don't know the answer to this, but I would like to get your opinion, each of you. Do you think that in the current situation that we're in, and obviously there's other issues too, I just want to mention too, just for the record, but there are some, it's not all financial. Now I think a large part of it's being driven by the financial benefit from the minerals there, but I do think that there are other issues at hand too. I do think that Rwanda has a legitimate concern regarding FDLR and the terrorist threat on their border as well. They have a tourism industry that they have to protect that's up in the northwestern part of their country that's really right on the border with population centers there. If mortars and rockets start landing there, there's no more tourism there. I saw, maps, and this because you're from there, from the area, you've been there, some of you, and it's, the city of Goma it's on the border, and it's one continuous city that goes into DRC, and there's no differentiation. So there has to be some level of security in that regard as well. So we need to figure out how we get these governments together, and we come up with a reasonable way that everyone can profit financially from partnerships there, so that they all want to see a level of safety and security there, and that everyone feels secure, because everyone is fighting some type of rebel group as well, whether it's ADF and the Islamic group that's up, that Uganda's engaged with, or whether it's, FDLR fighting to, overcome, or, M23 fighting to overcome FDLR, so on and so forth. But my question is, do you guys, one at a time, I'd like you to answer me, do you think that the current existing government in the DRC has the ability to do what I'm describing? Mr. Ngarama, you want to start?
Thank you, sir.
And if not, what do you think the answer is in brief terms?
First of all, thank you so much for your attention to this ongoing crisis in the Congo and the region. And I appreciate very much to bring the attention about this crisis been going for quite decades right now. And I feel very fortunate, particularly being in the United States, but all this time I want to think about my fellow citizens, in particular in Goma. Here's the thing. When I look at this problem, I think to find a solution is possible. And let me use a story. When I was at West Point, like 10 years ago, I was actually running a cadet, and I hope they're listening to me. We went along very well, very, very well. Actually, we're actually good friends. So in other words, peace is possible in that region. I just hope that the leaders, particularly the DRC, they understand that it's possible. And I really agree with everything you just raised here, sir. There's a lot of problems on the DRC side, but at the same time, the DRC side as well has to understand the problems of the Rwandan concerns, which is true, absolutely true. If you look at the UN reports that have been coming out in the past 4 years, with absolute evidences, there were collaboration between the senior authority officers with the FDLR. I'm not making that up. It's right in the UN report. Why did the DRC government tolerate that? Now see the consequences. On the other hand, about, for example, the resources along those lines, I think there is a lot of existing mechanisms, economic, political. We just need to enforce them so that they can bring regional stability. For example, which I think is quite frankly one of the best things ever, if the regional country actually focus on it with the Addis Ababa Agreement. And keep in mind that the Addis Ababa Agreement came right after the M23 again. Simply what's or the regional country, in particular the DRC government, had to focus on implementing those policy recommendations that were in that agreement, including fighting the corruptions, implementing good governance, and the security sector reform. But what we've seen over the past, let's say, 10 years, I think, since the Addis Ababa Agreement was signed, really we saw little progress. Now, people can argue the President Felix Tshisekedi has arrived, has not had much time, but come on, 7 years I think is enough to show what to do or the limits of what they can do. But I like to think that, particularly, so come back to your question, I like to be optimistic, but I'm not seeing any positive sign from the Kinshasa, particularly, to try to address some of the root causes of how this conflict has come so bad to the point of, bringing the region again back to the mess we saw back in the 90s. And particularly because, and again, I point out the UN reports, which are very, very, actually, I always like it when all sides contest the report. It means it's credible, it's correct, because there's no pointing on one side, for example, when the Goldman collapse, if anybody was reading quite carefully, objectively what's happening behind the scene, it was predictable. It was really predictable. For many reasons. I know there was no military strategy. It was just some kind of maybe a looting system from the DRC elites in Kinshasa, instead of trying to do what is correct. But anyway, sir, I'm optimistic. I'm very optimistic. I hope that President Kagame, Tshisekedi, all the efforts. I saw the meeting in the Doha, I think. I hope they read it somewhere. But most importantly, I would like to really emphasize on Washington, sir. Washington, most of these guys are looking at the Washington leadership. They're looking up to Washington, particularly the Trump administration, what they're going to do. We have the G20 summit coming up in November. I really hope the Trump administration will be engaged. I think it will not look good for all the leaders in the world to be in Johannesburg or Cape Town with a mess just in the backyard. So we still have some time, I think, to do what we can and somehow bring this to a successful conclusion along those lines. But thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor, for your engagement on this issue. See, you've really been boots on the ground there. I have conducted due diligence in DRC for about 4 years, and up until now, I still have not been able to approve some of the traders and investors that wanted to go there. They're mad at me, but I'm doing my job. And so I think that goes to answer your first question about the ability. Christ said, "You judge a tree by its fruits." And the past 7 years, the fruits, have not been tasteful. So what I would say is, as far as the answer to that ability, I think the president himself, President Tshisekedi, is juggling with that question. I think he's come to terms that he hasn't had the ability, and he's talked about a government reshuffling. If there's a government reshuffling that shows a drastic change in difference, perhaps that would embolden my answer to say yes. Give him another chance to show their ability, and then apart from that, I would say where the U.S. can play a role in helping with the ability. One thing the U.S. really does well is business.